Our next speaker to close out this year's conference is Dr. Tom Tyson, president of Appletree Medical Group and CEO of Canadian Health Systems. He invented the first touch-screen registration kiosks in Canadian healthcare, the first practice wait time tools for patients, and launched the most successful patient. The topic of his presentation is innovation that builds a better healthcare system. Please welcome Dr. Tom Tyson.
Thanks very much, Ian. And, all right, well, you know what? I'm a solutions guy. And so I'm going to bring you through a presentation. And if I may, I just would like to have, where's my little clicker? Thank you so much. Oh, okay, that's all right. If I may, first I'd like to thank Mike and his team for putting on a great conference. And the next thing, if I may, I just want to ask, how many of you are clinic owners? Hands up. And how many of you are practicing clinicians? Okay, all right. And because I have a lot of material to share, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it out like a salad bar, like a buffet, because each of you will have a different situation. And so I'm here to share our experiences and our solutions. I'm not a political guy. Our group, Appletree Medical Group, is apolitical. And in fact, I'll start right with that. What is Appletree Medical Group? So Appletree Medical Group is an integrated health system. What that means is this. My wife and I have 3 kids, and our 4th one's on the way. They were all followed by Appletree obstetricians. They see Appletree pediatricians, the 3 kids. And my wife and I see family doctors at Appletree. And if we're sick, we check wait times and go in on an open office basis. Our group in Ottawa and Toronto comprises 225 doctors, including every single specialty. And we're also the largest providers of telemedicine services in Canada at the primary care level. In Ontario, we take care of 25% of all telemedicine in the entire province, non-methadone. And so, we started in '92. My background is this. I did joint degrees in economics and medicine. And economics, a lot of people think it's about business. Nothing to do with business. It's about shortages. And the most visible manifestation of a shortage is a lineup. And it's really, if you hear about what people are talking about, they're talking about lineups and shortages. And so, interesting enough, we can learn from other industries about how to deal with this. And so I mentioned we're apolitical. I always felt at our end that as physicians, by working together, we would solve this problem. Otherwise, some third party will. But that third party will not have the physician-patient relationship at the core of their solution. And I think that'd be a tragedy, because although people talk about patient-centered healthcare, my focus really has always been the physician-patient relationship at the center of healthcare. And so everything we do is around supporting physicians and supporting people who support clinicians, clinic owners. So I'm going to show you ways that we have used successfully to demonstrate to people who wonder whether acute care and clinic, having clinics in the community, and whether you call them walk-in clinics or open office, the reality is if you can show a benefit to the doctors and a value proposition to them, you solve your first problem, which is attracting doctors. If in supporting the doctor you show benefit to our community, the politics will follow. And so, I used to have a picture of my family there, but I put this as a family because I feel in this venue, we're all family, we're all peers. We all face the same obstacles. We all have different ideas of solutions. And so nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. But I put that picture up there to remind you that why this is such a vital issue and everybody has an opinion on healthcare access is because all of us are patients as well. All of our families are patients as well. And so I always keep that in mind whenever we look at ways that we can improve the lives of our physicians. At the end of the day, doctors want a better work environment, just like anybody else. And the other thing, as knowledge professionals, the quality of their work environment directly impacts the quality of their care. And so if we think of those as guiding principles, and I apologize, my computer's not actually attached to your computer, and I'm just going to click through here to be in tandem with you, okay? So what I've been asked to do is I would like to just show you how we employ technology to improve our clinic operations. We have 38 facilities. and really in the service of supporting our staff, because frankly, it's always about people, it's never about technology. And what our staff are able to do in taking care of our doctors leads to an improved access and capacity for the community, improved service quality to the patient, and service is a component of quality of care. Ask anyone who's waited for 3 hours to see a doctor, and they'll say, service is a big component of their experience. And also, while lowering costs. And the reason I put that so important is that healthcare is the only industry in the world that thinks that employing technology raises costs. You look at your clothing, you look at your shoes, look at your car. The reality is that there is no other industry in the world that has this conceit that innovation should add to your costs, right? Why would you innovate if it added inefficiency? So very important. I'm going to put up here a model, and this might actually help clarify. Some of you, who here seen this before? This particular concept. Okay, and those that haven't, you'll lunch out on it for weeks. This is the model. This is the paradigm or lens through which people look at service industries. There is a strongly held belief that there is a trade-off between three things. There's three things on the menu, but you can only have two of them. So you want to have quality, you want to keep your expenses low, and you would like to have it quickly. Now, the idea and the problem with this paradigm I'm going to show you is that it's false. But first, I'm going to start off by saying that this informs the problem with how people view any service that improves access, because that means that you've added on fast. And we know that the province isn't paying anymore, so we'll still call that cheap. $30 is pretty cheap to see a doctor. And so even if people haven't stated it or even looked at this model, in the back of their heads, society has educated them to go, then the quality probably isn't there. Does that follow? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to arm you. First, I'm going to show you this. Actually, sorry. I was in Chicago at a conference, and one of the colleagues presenting actually not only showed this concept, but then highlighted the center of it and said the intersection of quality, inexpensive, and accessible was impossible, which to me is like raising, like you may as well wave a red flag in front of a bull. Because I got to tell you, it's not only not impossible, but the entire history of the Industrial Revolution since 1720 has been going in every other industry, and now our industry, to that center and achieving it. Begs the question, I'll close this. Why is it, if we hold quality constant, that you can only work with these two variables? How quick is it and how expensive is it? Why is it that everything in healthcare is so damn expensive or so damn slow to get done? I'm sure you ask yourself this every day. Is there anyone in here, put up your hand, who doesn't ask themselves this? Point made. If you take a look, there's no question that in the care of our patients, we have to administer. We have to navigate and coordinate care through a pharmacist, a specialist, a lab, diagnostic imaging, to a hospital and back. We have to maintain those records. This is all management. This is all administration that must be done that is the result of proper care. But the actual model for how each of those interactions, we'll call them transactions, occurs hasn't changed in 100 years. Essentially, you have to get information in a relevant way from one place to another. They have to be able to understand it and do their contribution and get it back to the right place. There's two elements to it: connectivity, I'm going to call it the media, and processor, the ability to take in that information and have it in such a way that you can make meaningful use of it. I'm going to call it cognitive load. And so I'll tell you that I don't think anyone here would argue that we're the last profession that operates by fax. The reality is that more and more things are becoming electronic. And I want to thank my friend over here. He said, change is inevitable adapting to it is optional. So I gotta tell you, we're moving to a more connected health system, whether you want to or not. But as physicians, we have a moral duty to be leaders. I always think of technology as a tiger. You either ride it or you get eaten by it. And I think we all want to be on the back of this tiger. So one of the problems as you connect more things is that the processor speed actually hasn't changed much in a couple thousand years. So I'm going to show you how we not just improve the connections, but concurrently reduce the cognitive load on the physician so that they can make use of the information and take better care of their patients quicker with higher quality, but also, and as the church says, no margin, no mission, at a lower cost. So I put this out to you as clinic owners, as friends and as peers, and as colleagues. Do you think that if we could improve the way your clinic functioned, that the operating efficiencies could make a difference in social measurements? Could we reduce wait times in your community is the first one I'm going to address. Could we improve the quality of care? An earlier speaker showed that only 15% of patients were very dissatisfied or quite dissatisfied with their care. I got to be honest, that's a disaster. When you think of the millions of patients that go through doctors' doors, that's the same as saying that 15% of that volume is going home unhappy. It's unacceptable in any other industry. Imagine going through a drive-through and having a 1 in 6 chance that the wrong thing's in the bag. Or going anywhere, pick any service industry, they'd all be bankrupt, they'd be gone. It's only because of our moral authority and because of our good intentions that people even put up with it. So, can we improve that by improving the operations of our facilities? You're not going to change the doctor. Can we do this while reducing the cost of delivering that care? Now, spoiler alert, yes, we can. I'm going to show you how, and I'm going to give you the numbers, and you can apply it to your own situations. But there is light at the end of this tunnel, and it's a short tunnel for the motivated. In doing so, could we then maybe move away from this distinction, this artificial distinction between walk-in clinics and medical practices? Everyone here who is a clinic operator, I pray that your differentiating value proposition when you try to attract a doctor isn't that we don't answer our phone and we don't book appointments, because that's not a big skill set. I'm hoping that your differentiating proposition is that we will manage your practice, whether by appointment, without appointment, or as a blended practice, in such a high-quality way that you will never want to work anywhere else, and you'll be able to focus on your practice and you'll have a better life. Is that the value proposition you want? So first thing, lineups. Everybody talks about lineups. I got to tell you, in economics, there's 200 years of studies on queues, and yet nobody seems to read any of them. Actually, I will tell you also, ironically, the 3 books that changed the world and that informed how we even look at problem solving, that no one's ever read: the Bible, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, and Marx's Das Kapital. Everybody's lives have been impacted by the thoughts in those books, and yet almost no one's ever read them. Well, so it is that we deal with lineups all the time, but raise your hand, please be honest. How many of you have gone and found articles on queuing theory? Yes! You are a geek. Just like me. Good for you. No, in all seriousness, though, it just isn't self-evident that you would turn to a book. Meanwhile, you see a lesion you don't know, what do? You turn to a book immediately. But when it comes to practice management things, there is information on this, and you are in the practice management business, whether it's by appointment or not is irrelevant. And there are great resources available. So first thing I'm going to ask you, how much efficiency do you actually need to make a difference in your community? How many doctors do you have to save time? How many extra doctors do you need equivalent to really collapse lineups in your community? So in fact, we've studied this, and we've executed on it. What if you want to shrink a lineup by 90%? So I'll tell you, the next time a hospital CEO tells you we're going to double the number of our staff to cut our lineup in half, he should be fired, because it's completely untrue. The relationship between lineups and capacity is logarithmic. If you are at 100% capacity, you have a nearly infinite lineup. But as soon as you add 10% back into the system, you collapse lineups dramatically. In fact, you add 20%, and you're now on the shouldering part of the curve, and because there are so many secondary lineups in healthcare, they all start to collapse, and you start to face underemployment, which is an issue no one's discussed, because no one believes it's achievable. But it's something that we're witnessing already in Ottawa and Toronto. And so here's how we shorten lineups. And I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. But because we work for the doctor as clinic owners, you need to know a core thing. I discovered this in 1987. And it's more true today than it was then. Back then, there was very little administration because there was very few services. They hadn't invented MRIs. There were no CAT scans. I didn't have a laptop. They hadn't been invented yet. The reality is that even back then, the lifetime of a doctor allowed for 80,000 billable hours. But if they ran their own office or clinic, they would never bill more than 30,000 of it. And that's actually what got me thinking. And I went, how can you be 10% short of someone who spends 2/3 of their time not doing their job? And then I started thinking, what are they doing? And so I finished the medical degree 2 years later, and what I did is I went out for 2 years and did time and motion studies in doctors' offices and clinics. And what I found out was, eureka, they really do lose 60% of their time to interruptions, to having to direct staff, to looking for tools that hadn't been anticipated and laid out in advance, to meeting with landlords, to dealing with, well, back then there wasn't much IT, but paper suppliers and whatnot. The point is this, is that this is a real number, and as clinic owners, you need to know this number, because this number, combined with how lineups form, is the answer for your community and for the success of your clinic together. Essentially, two big baskets. Doctors lose time to running their office, and they lose time to charting. The solution, and I would say, I don't know politics, but the political message is this. The solution isn't more doctors, in my opinion. The solution is professionally managed clinics. The truth is that there are already more people in this room that are doctors than there are in your province who are professional clinic managers. The reality is this, is that you are all trailblazers. Andrew Coyne made a great point, and he said, one thing that we're not big on in Canada is innovation. Well, who would normally innovate in a business? The people that run it. But in your business, you're also the clinician. You don't have time to run it. Every time you step out, every time a doctor steps out of the clinical world into the running my practice world, they're losing time. They're moving from $250 an hour down to $20 an hour, and they just can't stand the pain. So the time to innovate isn't there. Does that make sense? So that's why when I created Apple Tree, I said we're going to share everything we do. And we incorporated a company, Canadian Health Systems. Apple Tree is a test kitchen. And then what we do is we basically share as a co-op across the country now different things that we've learned, because we will support any group that wants to have a properly run health system in their community. And that's very important. That's our mission. We're a mission-driven organization. If your interest is in giving your doctor the best possible clinical environment, the best work environment, everything flows from that, and we will support you in it. Now, what are the advantages of doctors moving to your clinic, a professionally run clinic that they don't have to run? Well, there's quite a few. Division of labor is the most obvious. There's two things going on in your doctor's office: the practice of medicine, the running of the practice. Now it's two different people, and you've given that doctor back their time. They can go, so in our group, our doctors achieve 70,000 lifetime hours. Because you are focused on managing and running the administrative and business side of it, you develop significant expertise, and because it's not a bad thing, because you're constrained on the 30% end or the 25% end of the stick, you become a very intelligent deployer of capital because you're building a business. And the reality is that if you don't have a margin, you're not going to have a business. And so as a result, you will make better decisions than a practitioner will about the management decisions. If you're the one focusing on the management decisions, just like they're going to make better medical decisions when you decrease their cognitive load by running their practice for them and taking away all the administration that used to be part of their bailiwick. What tools do you have to leverage as a clinic owner? Some of you have 6 clinics, 4 clinics. Some of you have 1 clinic. All of you, though, have access to tools to leverage. I'm only going to highlight 4 basic groups. One is delegation. Delegation of simple tasks. Doctors spend a lot of times, and by the way, if you want, I can make the slide deck available to you if you're taking pictures and stuff. It'll be easier. But delegation is a very important thing. It's the reason you say, God, I wish we had more nurses. But interestingly enough, there are 45 clinical acts that map onto 80% of primary care presentations that save an average of 6 minutes per case. Now, when I started Appletree, the mantra was, save the doctor a minute a patient, you save them a month a year. And then we went to 2 minutes. Then we went to 3 minutes. And when we got to 6 minutes, we had doubled the availability of the doctor, doubled their productivity, and I tell you, solutions in the community flowed from that. And like I said, I'm not a political guy, but you know what? In 2 weeks, I'm meeting with the Deputy Health Minister to discuss solutions on a broad, scalable thing. Sharing, I don't care who does it, we'll share our experiences because he's also looking for solutions. And so I can tell you that by solving your community, you will also have better control of the solution and ensure that it's relevant to how doctors want to practice in your community. Does that make sense? The other thing is centralizing and outsourcing. How many of you outsource some of the basic functions of your offices now? Okay. But not that many, to be honest, right? So outsourcing and centralization enabled by a platform that lets you do it securely and on a money-saving basis. The other one is automation of every logical, repetitive task. And then load shifting. For those of you who are building numbers of clinics, load shifting is an underutilized but critically important arrow in your quiver to save you money and improve access to care with the patients. If you only have one location, you can still load shift, and I'll show how that works. So that's kind of the overview, okay? I'll start with just, here's what we do for delegation. I realized back in '92 that the labor force that works in medical centers in general are medical office assistants. But if you start to have division of labor, you can have them focus on specific tasks. If you start to automate those things that don't need to be done by a person, hence the introduction of a touchscreen kiosk system, you free up your staff to either go home or to do higher value work, such as basic clinical skills, dipping urines, heights and weights, blood pressures and heart rates, temperatures, etc. And so what we did is we created a place, it was a physical location at the time, and it had little X's on the floor, where to stand, scripting, because we wanted to attract and then train a labor force that could actually manage a high-performance practice. And so then we needed to be able to bring this anywhere people need it. So we put it onto a platform. So we called it Appletree U. It's not very inventive. I mean, there's Hamburger U, there's Sandwich U, and we, Hamburger U, for McDonald's, part of their secret sauce in terms of consistency. So we created something called Appletree U, and it's evolved over the years, and we also now have a whole segment on physician training, franchise training, etc. Centralization and automation. I'm going to give you a hard example because it's something that all of you deal with and something you can immediately save a lot of time and money on. Essentially, I'm going to show you consults, because consults is actually a laborious, time-intensive process. Would you agree? And so this is a typical patient care transfer process. The doctor needs to refer to someone. The staff either faxes it over or calls them, depending on the other doctor's office rules. The other office then either adjudicates it or passes it to the doctor to adjudicate, who then boots it back. And then depending on the office, they either call the patient directly and send you the appointment, or they call you and say, here's the appointment, you call the patient. And so somebody's contacting the patient, and we took a look at this, and we essentially automated the process. And without getting into all of the technical details, before we turned it on, at the time we had 80 doctors, and we had 12 full-time equivalents handling inbound and outbound consults, because think of that third row as our specialists at the time. As we grew, take a look at the number of people now doing that process. Well, I can tell you that with this release, actually this weekend, we will go down to one person handling 225 doctors. So that's a big deal. Why is that a big deal? Because right now, to staff your clinics, you are spending 18% of billings. Take a look at your top-line productivity, and then take your total burden, your total staff, plus your CPP and whatnot. And what you're going to see is that, holy moly, you're spending 18% of billings on it. Whereas we operate comfortably between 8 and 12%, depending on the type of practice. On walk-in, we go below 8%. Now that's a big deal, because what that means is that 10 points is available to you through just simple changes in the way your office is run. And it could take you from a position of losing money or no margin to one where you have a healthy margin and you can reinvest in the resources available to your staff and doctors. The net result of applying these concepts of delegating, centralizing, and automating, and by the way, centralization can happen in your office. The person who answers the phone isn't necessarily the right person to be bringing patients in. It's two totally different jobs. As soon as you have 2 or more staff, you have the ability to start division of labor. As soon as you have 3 or more, one of them doesn't have to be on site to do their work if you have a proper platform. Now, we've taken it to a larger extent, so we operate contact centers in Ottawa and in Toronto and in the Philippines, so that we have failover if there's ever a national emergency. We're part of pandemic preparedness planning in our community in Ottawa. And so, because as you grow, your social responsibility becomes larger, and you have to start planning redundancy. Plus, because we have always maintained a healthy margin, we've always felt it was part of our commitment to reinvest that into a better and better and better system that the community could always trust and count on. So, if you take a look, you can double your doctor's productivity. You can significantly reduce your clinic OPEX, which are your operating expenses. Next thing is your rent, but it isn't, it's variable. A typical clinic is doing throughput of what, $250, $300 a foot. You have your rent, but if you can increase your throughput to $400 or $500 or in some cases $600 a foot, well, your rent just got cut in half. So even something that you think of as a fixed expense is not fixed, it's only fixed in your mind. It is not fixed. It is relative to the productivity that you can enable your doctors through your staff to generate. And, Now, the next thing is this. I talk about load shifting because there's different ways we do it. For instance, we have multiple facilities in both cities. So we use a wait time tool where if the wait's high in one, you can go to the other. Your chart is always with you anywhere you go within the Appletree system. But rather than highlight that for this conference, a lot of you have 1 clinic or 2 clinics. So I thought, okay, let's look at instead load shifting and what we call is patient engagement. If you think of it, you have 3 classes of people involved in the operation of your office. You've got clinicians, you've got staff, and you've got patients. We find that the patient part is badly under-leveraged in most organizations. And yet, interestingly enough, you make them pay a heavy price to see you. A lineup is an externalized cost. Ask anyone who's sitting in a lineup whether or not they are paying, and they will tell you they are paying. The fact is their time is very valuable. However, if you can make them part of the solution and have them do the work that previously was done by staff or by yourself, and if it's the type of work that is in line with their own interests, which is to have a better quality chart, to know their appointment times, or to know how wait times are. So we give tools to patients. We let them check in from home. It counts down like Uber and then buzzes them in when there's 1 or 2 people ahead so that they don't have to sit in the waiting room. We have a patient portal that allows people, and these are the results of it. Oh, here, I'll just jump to this. We offer them the remote tools, so from home they know the weights, and they can check it from home if the weight is unacceptable, if it's over, say, 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and there isn't an alternate Apple Tree to go to, we let them go, or they just want to stay with the same doctor, they can just register from home. When they come in, they go to the kiosk, and it speaks multiple languages because we're in an urban environment, and language is a frictional expense in a doctor's office. And so what we do is we have translation tools built in so that people can register in their own language, but the output is English into our chart and our system. We also, when they leave our office, let them go home, and you know the case, patient's got a little bit high blood pressure, check it at home 3 or 4 times, upload it. What they do is they go on the portal and they put it in, and it actually shows them the graph, but it also ends up in our chart for their next visit. Blood sugars, things like that for home monitoring. That's this my chart. You do the same thing. I think what you're doing is brilliant. The other thing is remote data capture. So remote data capture refers to the ability to have a computer assist the patient in the production of a proper history or form, but also then the computer knowing that information, we have an AI level underneath it that allows it to navigate the patient. So for example, let's say you're registering from home, and why are you coming in? Is it illness, injury, specific service? And they say, I'm coming in for a PAP. Well, we don't do PAPs on a walk-in basis. But you can click the link, and you can book through the portal at the next available PAP clinic. Happy patient, happy doctor. Nobody wants patients showing up and say, I don't do stitches. Sorry you didn't know, right? And so these tools help navigate the right cohort to the right provider at the right time without misunderstandings. Gives the doctor much more control over their practice in your facility. These are just pictures that we're just showing you. This is a real wait time tool. This is our portal. This is just one of our, I think that it looks like Midland, one of our facilities. So we operate facilities between 2,000 feet and 15,000 feet. We take care of about 70,000 patients a month, something like that. We also have a complete apps, think of it like an Apple Tree, apps on that Apple Tree. So for specific employment categories, somebody had earlier mentioned, I think it was Dr. Blom, mentioned, we also need to work on increased revenue. And so one thing I have to tell you is this, is that if you identify as a walk-in clinic for the purpose of not having a long-term relationship, remember what Andrew Coyne said, 30% of health spend is private. He's right, by the way. In Ottawa, we're over, I think it's 35% non-OHIP. If you don't have a relationship with the patient, though, while that may be expedient in some ways, you will lose the private spend. So, and am I running out of time? Okay. You will lose the private spend. I'm just going to put it out there. And so these engagement tools allow you to still operate without appointment, but still have full engagement and continuity of care of the patient because the computer's doing most of it. We have something called Prevention Wall where patients are able to go and they, essentially 50-year-old female, they need a requisition for mammogram. Why do they have to come see me? Well, don't waste your time. Here's your mammogram requisition. Ask a few computer-assisted questions to qualify whether you need one or not or are appropriate for one. So there are ways to engage the patients and have that same great relationship without losing your time, and that would allow you to be in a position then to provide non-OHIP services. I think you'd be better positioned for it. Does it make sense? Or non-BC HIP service. So to that end, what we do is we have apps for different employment categories. So, some people may want to do truckers' physicals. Okay, well, we got an app for that. Because truckers need different type of health care. 96% are male. They have, very rarely do they have regular health care because they're always on the road, and they've got issues. They've got sleep apnea issues, big time. They got weight issues. They got hemorrhoid issues. What I'm getting at is every employment category is something different, and so the apps present to them what's useful. We run the Student Health Center at York. So what do students need? Well, frankly, it's birth control, STIs, UTIs. Acne, mental health, and falls, like sports injuries. And then this is just a picture of the remote data capture. In fact, actually, Matt was demonstrating it. It's his company that does it. And what this does is a computer-assisted history that then constructs the note for the doctor so that instead of writing the note, you can edit the note, which cuts your charting time down by about 75%. And that's our answer to charting. You know what our answer is to administration. We take it all away. Let the doctor just practice with full autonomy of their practice while we get busy doing the administration and putting all these tools in place to make them look better and allow them to function better. But we also then use tools to cut down charting. And I could tell you, I imagine already yourselves, you get the sense that in that sort of an environment, the doctor wakes up in the morning and goes, I'm going to work today. I love seeing patients, because at the end of the day, if you ask doctors, what do you really want to do? Here's $1 million check as a test. They go, I want to see patients. Let's enable them to see patients. Now, because of an economics background, I'm an empiricist. All sounds good, but does it work? Okay, so here's some results. So we do results. We do about 6 to 7 peer-reviewed research projects every year. Real-world outcomes, gout treatment, diabetes, asthma. We just sent out 25,000 surveys on all of our asthmatic patients to learn more about their real experience of asthma as opposed to what we think their experience is in between visits. So the thing is this. In Ottawa, which has about a population of 950,000 people, 10% of all full-time doctors are in our group, representing all specialties plus 10% of all the family doctors. However, we actually deliver 15 to 20% of all care in the entire city. Which you might say, why isn't it 20%? You said you doubled it. Well, I'll tell you why. Every doctor that joins actually cuts their hours after a little while. Once they realize that the new income is stable, they go work-life balance, which is a good thing. It frees up space. Bring in another doctor then. But the point I'm getting at is that if you look at these numbers, what we've been able to do is dramatically reduce wait times. In Ottawa, only city in Canada, you can see a doctor within 7 days, within an hour, 7 days a week by checking wait times. And in Toronto too, as we've grown, we built a new facility every 8 weeks really for the last 5 years. And as we implement our system, we're seeing the same complete collapse in wait times. And for specialists, we can get into a specialist within 2 weeks in either city because we're electronically connected to them. All the frictional costs are gone. So in that period of time in Ottawa, though, because it's a secondary market in Ontario, there has been no net increase in MD to population. And yet, the city canceled their physician recruitment and retention committee because they realized that we were going to a position of physician oversupply, even though the number of doctors relative to population actually hadn't changed at all. And in fact, one of our senior staff sat on that committee, and they sunsetted it. You did that study you sent me. You said the apple tree effect. One of the 4 major hospitals in Ottawa, is a busy emergency department, but it's fascinating because their ratio of CTAS 1 through 5, serious to not so serious cases, the level of acuity has gone up every single year for the last decade, which means they're seeing fewer simple family medicine cases. But their volumes, in a city that is actually growing quite quickly in the West End, their volumes have actually been going down. And as a percentage of population, they've been going down in lockstep with the number of doctors joining our group. Every doctor that moves to this sort of format, and so every doctor that moves to one of your clinics should be the equivalent of their twin moving to the city with no patients. So thank you very much, and I hope that was helpful, some ideas.
How